We got onto the 13th floor. I was going up in a lift. The guy stood next to me in orange, and he said to me, "Can you help me?" He was talking to me in Dutch, and he said to me, "Can you help me get in the door? Everybody's trying to break my door down." And I went, "What floor do you live on?" He went, "Your floor, don't worry about it. Just when you get out, tell him." So I got out the floor, and there were a whole crowd of people trying to batter this door down. And I said to everybody, whoa, 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 this guy's got a key, stop doing that. And everybody turned around to me and said, "What do you mean?" I went, "Him." And I looked, not there. And the guy next to me said, "Who are you talking to?" And I went, "The guy with the orange T-shirt on, blonde hair, and a big tattoo all down the side of his neck." I said, "It was him." I said, "Well, I don't know where he is." I said, "I know what he's done, he's run off." Just as I said that, they bashed the door down, and lying on the floor in front of me was the guy with an orange T-shirt, tattoo, blonde hair. It was his spirit. He'd been murdered. The guy I was talking to next to me was actually a policeman, and they arrested me on the spot. Well, in its simplest form, it's a way of clearance, removing. We remove energy, what you might call a ghost, spectre, whatever you want to call it. That's what my job is basically go in and sort out where you've got a problem. I'm going to do a very quick story now. But when I'm about 6 years of age, my father brought a rocking chair into the property, and I started to scream because I could see an old lady in it. And I would refuse to go in the front room. I refused to go and do anything near it. But I kept describing this lady with a scarf around her neck, and it seemed like she was trying to talk to me, and I couldn't do it. But I ran upstairs. Next morning, I ran downstairs straight to school. The infant school was literally down the road from me. So I ran there, and that was it, sat there. My dad, out of curiosity, went to the neighbour opposite, because he got it from the neighbour opposite, only to find out that his mother had died in the chair and she'd broken her jaw, and that's what the scarf was. So that's the first inkling that my dad had that I obviously knew something. The first exorcism I ever did when I was 9. I was one of those kids that you couldn't keep in the home. I would run out the back door, and if there was anything that looked weird or graveyard, I'd run into it. But opposite us, there was an old petrol station, and behind the back of that was an old house. I ran into there, and running around it, I could see there was a hole in the wall next to the next house. As I walked through it, this thing came at me, a big black mass, and it was an awful looking face. And I screamed at it, words that I didn't even know what was coming out of my mouth, really. It turned out to be a Latin liturgy I was giving. I don't even know Latin, so it just came out, and the thing just disappeared, and I ran home. And at that moment, I started hearing voices. And I know this is going to sound weird to you, but I started hearing a female voice, and it was her voice that was telling me what was going on, what to listen to and talk to. And that's basically how I started. So throughout my life, I've consistently heard a female who tells me things, explains things to me. So when I'm sitting in front of somebody and I start telling them what I'm seeing around them or what's going on, it shocks them, but it's because I'm hearing something. That's really what I'm doing. I'm listening to something, and they're talking to me. My father's army. So when I was explaining it to him, he's a very strict man for saying, tell the truth. And he drilled me down because he thought I was making something up because I just didn't want to be in the room. So he took me to a psychologist, basically, and she sat down in front of me and started talking to me. Within about 5 minutes of me talking to her, there was a lady stood next to her, so I started telling her who I was looking at. And it shocked the life out of her because that was her mother who'd passed away a week before. And I was describing what she was wearing in the coffin, and it freaked her out. So when she came out to see me dad, she said to me dad, normal lad was just got this weird thing he does. And that was my dad set then. So my dad believed, but he didn't believe. It was one of those things. But that was actually good grounding for me, because if I came home and talked about things, my dad would grill into me what I was doing, what I was seeing. And it made me, I suppose it kept my feet on the floor, really. And it was because of him I kind of kept rolling. My mother's Irish, and she grew up during the Troubled times, really. And she had a very strong belief. And because of that, as I was growing up, I mean, I went to a school called St. Mary's. So it was run by nuns, and it was run by various different people along that faith. So I got to understand parts of faith. But at a very young age, you don't fully take it on board, what's going on. It's only later on in life that you start to realise what faith's about. But I'd started to believe a different thing. I'd started to understand in my own right that there were energies out there that were I could see and communicate with. And I knew they weren't part of what we call physical world. They weren't in this realm. And it was very hard for me to keep quiet about it because I went through school bullied. I was that weird kid. And then one day the school bully decided to have a go at me, and I stood there and told him what he'd been doing the night before, and it freaked him out. And suddenly the rest of school then left me alone because I was that weird kid that I knew things and they just kept me away. Then I went to university and I became a cool dude. Everybody at university wanted me to go and talk to groups of girls so I could go over to a group of girls and go, didn't your grandfather used to do this? And, didn't he? And that was the introductions I was doing. I got a call from a building company in Harrogate, and they'd said to me, they'd heard about the fact I could do this mediumistic thing. Could have come out to a property and have a look at what they'd got. And I said, yeah, okay, fair enough, I'll come out and have a look. Now I'm 19, full of the joys of spring, thinking I'm the biggest, best thing in the world because I was full of confidence. Drove up the drive. As soon as I got to this big, lovely house, the main guy there, gave me the story of tools missing, things disappearing, people getting attacked and pushed and thumped. And I went, yeah, fair enough, I'll go in. And as soon as I walked in, I'm stood there and I'm kind of like real cocky and I'm going, yeah, is anybody in here? And I saw this man walk down the stairs straight to me and he hit me full on in the chest and I went flying out backwards. And I landed on my backside, realised this thing had just seen me and it realised he was going to have a go at me. And that's when I realised that force needs sorting. So I went back in and started dealing with it one-on-one. And the guys around me couldn't believe I'm talking to space from their point of view, but I'm talking to a guy in front of me and he was intent on causing damage. And that caused me then to figure out who he was, what he was doing, and that's when I did a clearance, got rid of him. If you've got somebody in front of you that's aggressive, the best way of dealing with them is to try and get that aggressive level down. So you either back off a little bit or you negotiate, you talk. So I often used to call myself a negotiator because that's what I'm doing basically, is trying to go in and talk to an energy and find out what the problem is. Human beings as we are, we upset people left, right and centre. We don't mean to sometimes. It might be just banging into somebody as you walk down the road, or you might look at somebody in a funny manner and not realise you've just upset that person because of a look or a gesture. You know, I was trying to find out what this thing had got a problem with. So that's where the one-on-one connection was going. But very quickly realised this thing wasn't going to he wasn't going to sit back and just take, would I calm down and leave him alone for nature? He was going to go for it. So I then had to go, right, I've got to basically, what I call bind, which is basically try and get an energy force to wrap around it to pull it apart. And then we do a banishing technique where it's like, you can't come back in this property. So if I talk about religious terms, it would be a blessing, it would be a prayer, or it would be, if you talk about a building, you put a wall up so you stop people coming in. And that's what I did with this thing. It's just basically say, go. So it now roams the ground, which is less harmful. And it's calmed down. It literally is warfare. When you get up in life and you walk around in life, your day starts off either good or bad, depending on where you're going. But in this term, it's always going to be bad because they're always looking to prove their existence, prove what they're doing. But I've got like a little army that comes in. So I'm not just working on my own, I'm working with a few others. And they'll come in and help. But if I have to physically put my arms out and feel that energy, I will do. So I lived in a block of flats. I was on the 13th floor. How ironic is that? But anyway, we got onto the 13th floor. I was going up in a lift. The guy stood next to me in orange and he said to me, can you help me? He was talking to me in Dutch and he said to me, can you help me get in the door? Everybody's trying to break my door down. And I went, what floor do you live on? He went, your floor, don't worry about it. Just when you get out, tell them. So I got out the floor and there were a whole crowd of people trying to batter this door down. And I said to everybody, whoa, this guy's got a key, stop doing that. And everybody turned around to me and said, what do you mean? I went, him. And I looked, not there. And the guy next to me said, who are you talking to? And I went, the guy with the orange T-shirt on, blonde hair, and a big tattoo all down the side of his neck. I said, it was him. I said, well, I don't know where he is. I said, I know what he's done. He's run off. Just as I said that, they bashed the door down, and lying on the floor in front of me was the guy with an orange T-shirt, tattoo, blonde hair. It was his spirit. He'd been murdered. The guy I was talking to next to me was actually a policeman, and they arrested me on the spot. How would I know what this guy was looking like? So they took me to Eindhoven, and I was in the police station in there, having to try and explain what happens to me, because it happens. A lot of this stuff happens to me by accident. I don't sit down and look for it. It happens by accident. Luckily for me, he was English, so he understood kind of where I was coming from. They brought in this case and said to me, can you tell me what's in this case? So I put my hands on it, and I explained a particular spot. They went out and found, from my description, went out and found the knife that had killed him and found the murderer. But because you can't use me in a court of law, they basically had to do the proper legal channels. But at least they'd got it, they'd sorted it. And then the next minute, the press heard about it, and Phillips didn't know what to do with me, because every time I turned up, there was a whole press gang out there from all over the world. They were all trying to get hold of me. And so they flew me back home. And I stayed here.
Hi, welcome to Deep.
This channel goes a level deeper.
Deep is a brand new YouTube channel that is dedicated to the amazing experiences of incredible individuals.
We basically try and answer the questions that you always want the answer to, but you don't feel like you can ask.
Myself and the team are responsible for a lot of the factual content that you might have seen on YouTube, Minutes With, The Gap, Agree to Disagree, among others. And we set up this new studio and this new channel to go a level deeper.
We will be uploading a new video every single week.
There'll be a wide range of stories, so please hit the subscribe bell.
Please let us know in the comments if there's anything you want us to cover, any stories that you've been interested in, any questions you wanted to ask.
We hope you enjoy. Now back to our story.
I'm not going to be bravado and say, oh yeah, I don't get scared. Yeah, I do. I'm on the edge. I'm dealing with something that I can't physically control. I can spiritually control it. It's a different way. So if somebody comes towards me and I can physically see them, I'll hold on to them. I can deal with that. But when you're dealing with an energy that could be in front of you 1 minute, behind you the next, standing next to me for 1 minute, here in front, you've got to be sharp, and I'm on edge. So when I do what I do, when I've finished, I'm physically wrecked and I'm mentally wrecked. I'm having to really work hard. And to say I don't get scared, yes, I do. The most terrifying case I've ever had is where a woman went on fire in front of me. Not only had to deal with the woman because I had to dive on her, and that was instant reaction. That was just basically in the back of my head. I knew I had to roll her over and put the fire out. She'd burnt her leg from inside outwards. But this energy is intent on making fires at every single opportunity it could. It tried to burn the cot where the kid was in. It tried to burn the furniture I was sat on. It burnt all the hall stairs and landing. It was literally intent on creating fire all the time. And that is terrifying. Paranormal group had been in, 7 vicars had been in, you've got the council had been in, the police had been in, the umpteen people had been in, and I'm the last call. So I get this call, could I go over and talk to the family? Drove down the road, and it's a brand new building. I'm stood there, and as I'm standing there, the building next door to her crumbled inwards. So we had to pull the family out fast. Her home was fine, but the house next door had imploded. It had gone in on itself. So the first thing we had to do then is engineers came out. Engineers still to this day can't figure out how it's done that. Impossible. So they braced it all. So about 2 or 3 days later, I went into the property and knew immediately I was dealing with something bad. Now, in life, if you've ever faced a murderer or faced somebody that you know could potentially really seriously harm you, you have a different level of feeling. It's a completely different way of feeling towards another person or another human being. When I went in, I could feel, not only did I feel on edge, all my hairs went up, but I also felt like I was sharp. All my senses had turned up. I knew straight away this thing was going to have a go at me. And it did. We were in the kitchen. And she said to me, she was facing me, she was literally an arm's length away from me. And she said to me, would you like a cup of tea? And I went, yeah, let's have a cup of tea, let's settle down. She turned, and as she walked forward, something caught my eye on the floor, like a little glint of light. And I looked down, and there was a blue flame. It literally leapt from the floor onto her leg, and then all of a sudden, her leg just seemed to explode in this flame. And I realised she was on fire. When I put my arms out to get hold of her, you would expect if something's on fire to be hot. This was the complete opposite. It was freezing. And it enveloped all around my arms. It was a blue flame. When I grabbed her and I rolled her on the floor, because she was screaming, I grabbed her and put her on the floor, and I was trying to get the clothes off her because I could see they were on fire. I'm pulling those off her, and then I realised her leg was severely damaged, so I sat on her. All the time I'm doing this, I'm shouting various commands and various things because the energy that was there was intent on pinpointing her to tease me, to say I can hurt her, but this is your fault. So I realised I quickly had to take hold of this. I'm so thankful her mother was stood there, and her mother was the one that came in to witness what was going on. I then had to literally wrap her up and drag her out the kitchen into the front room. Within minutes, and I'm talking minutes, I had a whole army of police piling into the property, including an ambulance crew. The paramedic that was looking at a leg literally turned round to me in front of the police crew and said, "How the hell has her bone turned to ashes? It's bubbled the skin." And he looked and went, "It's burnt inside outwards, like a microwave would do." Bubbled the skin from inside out. His face went white because he couldn't quite, and we were all shocked. They took her off. The police arrested me because I was what they termed an alien in the group. I wasn't belonging to the family, I wasn't a family member, and yet suddenly this woman had been attacked. So they naturally assumed it was me. Fair comment. To them, I was just this guy doing some supposedly weird work. It was the mother that sat with them and explained to them what was going on. And then a council member rang them and said to them, "This is what he's there for," that they let me go and said, "Continue." And they were I've got to be honest with you, they were incredibly helpful because they kept any bystanders and anybody else looking at the property away. And they parked a car outside for 2 days while I was in there. To keep an eye on me, but also to make sure nothing else was going on. But even they couldn't quite get their head around. I'm going to tell you now that the area that I was in has already had 5,000 exorcisms all around the area. It's one of the most notorious areas in the UK for what it's got. And I'm not telling you where it is, but because it's the one case that I gave up doing this work with, because it's the first time in my life I actually really seriously felt that was going to be it for me. And I can't ever explain to you what that feels like inside. I stepped back from it. I gave it all up. People kept ringing me and I kept saying, "No, go and find somebody else." And then another case came up where they were desperate. And I thought, I'll go in and help just a bit. And I got back into it again. When she sits up and her head spins around and it's green puke plonking out of the place, that won't happen. It's much more of a natural phenomena. On a very, very, very rare case is it where somebody's physically lifted, moved around a property. Most time, it's more physical things to a person. So it's like an object hitting you. It's like an lesion coming on your skin or things like this, or mental breakdowns. It's things that are more common. That Exorcist case that you're talking about with the film, I've never witnessed anything like that. The best one I've ever witnessed is the fire lady. That's my top of the tree. Because up until then, I thought I'd done another one, which was a top one where only a few days ago, I'm dealing with a lady who's got an incubus, who's a sexual ghost that's attacking her physically. And when you see fingerprints on people's skin and legs being pulled apart and lifted up and dragged, you can't tell me that's her doing it, because we couldn't stop it. It was a case of me physically getting hold of her and then deciding this is what we're going to do. So It's a hard concept for anybody to get their head around because all this type of stuff exists in CGI, films and things like that. When it's happening in real life, it's a whole new ballgame. If you've got a physical apparition that's taken over somebody's body, you now have got another particular type of energy. You've got to fight two things, the energy plus the person. And I always say whenever I'm dealing with this thing, not only am I dealing with the energy, but I've got the person to deal with. Because once an energy's gone, it's like a bereavement. In half the cases I've dealt with, a lot of people are like, they're half expecting it back. Well, if you're half expecting it back, you're half bringing it back again. So I've got to literally tell you, when I deal with this, I'm telling you, it's gone. Don't get me wrong, you need skeptics and you need scientists, you need everybody else to get along with it. But I tell you what, when you've got this thing running in front of you and it's doing things, physically doing things, that's it. But a possession, as far as a mental anguish goes, so as far as a physical person goes, it happens, but it's rare. Battersea Poltergeist is a classic example, isn't it? A young girl gets taken over, she speaks different languages, she has different formats of aggression, passiveness. She has different attitudes to her, different languages. And what you've got going on there is that's a possession of types. In the old days, you were classed as being mentally ill. Today, thankfully, there are processes to go in place where we can look through that and see whether or not somebody is anguished or not, or whether there's anything going on. But it's a rare thing, but I've got a problem with it because you've got to deal with the person first. I've got to convince this person they're going to be doing it. So it's a lot of training. A lot of exorcisms on that level are not I don't walk in, do it and leave. We could be talking months. I've one case in particular, 25 years I've been dealing with it. That's up in Edinburgh. There's a young lady up there who, normal in life, can't have a working life because her bones go floppy. A hard concept. So you've got a very strong bone in your arm, but when it turns to rubber and it flops and you get contorted into different angles, you're looking at a different kind of energy. And this energy won't leave her alone and it torments her. But it doesn't do it every day. But when it comes in, it's devastating for her. I certainly can't get to the bottom of it. There's a fair few of us dealing with it. We've got professors of medicine and all sorts with her trying to work out what this is as well. But it's an energy form that will in time dissipate, but it's 25 years on, it's still playing. Exorcist by its name is generally associated with the Catholic Church, but it doesn't mean that. The word means clearance. A fair few years back, it was the weirdest call I've ever had. I got this call to go to visit this. I don't want to say too much. I met this guy and he said to me, "We want you to go over and have a chat with somebody in the Vatican City." And I went, "Really?" Yeah. So I went over. I sat there. This guy walked in, he chatted to me, he was explaining things to me because he'd understood things I was dealing with. I'd come forward with a whole range of information that only they knew about. How would I know it? I'm at a higher level than most others, and I knew more than the general public out there knew. How did I know? So they were quizzing me about what there was, and it's then they introduced me to some of their things that they'd got. Very thankful that they were very, what's the word I can put? They complimented me on the work. They didn't particularly want me to carry on, but they understood why I was doing it. They understood the reasons for my way of dealing with it. So I got some contacts out of it to give me some more help. And that's how I got involved in that. So that was for me was a nice high point in my career, I suppose, if you look at it that on this. But it was nice to get some background help. Because they're not closed off. I think a lot of people think that religions are closed off to likes of me. They're not. They would rather deal with it. They would rather get on with it themselves and they'd rather deal with it in their way. But if I can help, that's what I do. One of the most striking and weirdest things I've ever seen was I went to a home in Chester and there was a paranormal team in there doing their thing. And I suggested to them, well, why don't you try table tipping? It was an interesting way of seeing whether something would go and use a table. So they pulled this round table out with 3 legs. They're all standing by it. And the table started doing its shaky thing. Now, the first thing everybody's doing is looking at each other's hands going, who's pushing it? So because I was filming it. So what you've got people arguing at each other saying, you don't. And then suddenly the table on its own moves and you see them go with it. It hits the stairs. And I'm looking at it going, well, that's the end of it. No, it then tips back and puts 1 foot on the first stairs and swings the other 2 feet to go on to the next one. And I couldn't believe what I was watching. This is an energy form that's actually using a table to walk upstairs. And we're talking, I think there's about 20 steps. Then it turns a corner to go up 5 more. But everybody on it is trying to keep up with the table. You see people getting out of its way, and you see people with their hands on it trying to chase it. It's literally... And what it was doing, because I'd realised very quickly, it was showing off. Basically, it said, I could lift this table and throw it. But why don't I play with you? Why don't I do something with you and show you how I can play? And it used the people to walk up the stairs. And when you see the footage, it's not a trick. It's genuine. And then it started to make them run. It went on this big floor and it just literally, and they were all running after it to stop it. And but it's weird when you see it. That's how clever it can get. If that energy wanted to be nasty, it certainly could have turned and it could have made life hell for everybody. And they do. When they realise they've got you, when they realise they can hook you, they're off. I have another one, and I'm trying to get hold of the footage. I was in a pub that had been on fire. The brewery company had asked me in and said to me, "What? It's just a random fire. What's happened?" Well, as soon as I hear random fire, I'm like, right, okay. The electrician had been in and they couldn't put it down. The fire crew had been in, they couldn't put it down to anything. We're all stood there looking and we saw this WKD bottle floating in midair. And we're all looking at it and I'm looking at it going, I know what's going to happen next. And it literally goes from being 6 foot to onto the floor within milliseconds. It flew, shattered all over the place. And that's it. Everybody was out. But it took me a second to realise because I was like, oh, it's phenomenal. But it was actually saying to us all, get out now before I start a fire. The most common thing is items disappearing and then reappearing. So you put your keys down and you swear you've put them in a certain spot, but they've moved. Money disappearing. Animals reacting, looking, staring. And the other one, the big common one, is this glistening effect. It catches the corner of your eye. That's your optics nerves being played with. But it's where you get a glint of something in the corner of your eye and you look to see what it is and there's nothing there. And that's common. Very common. We live with them all day long, It's just we don't 99% of the cases, they don't bother you. And you don't bother them, you just get on. Best part of my job, I promise you, it's the relief that people have once we've dealt with something. It's that, for me, is the joy of it. I love being able to help. The worst part of it is knowing that I've got to go and deal with something because most of the time, I really don't know how it's going to react. I might know what I'm going to, but I don't know how it's going to react, so I have to think about it. Certainly the worst case I've ever had was the fire case because I don't ever want to go back there. I thought I'd dealt with evil until I hit that. But the joy I get from seeing people's faces and I've got a lot of people that are so thankful for things I've done. I must tell you on a little side note, when I do an exorcism, I don't just do it, I do it with people. So I want to empower people to actually be able to help. Whether they feel like they're not helping at all is another thing, but they need to do it. It's a belief system, it's intent, you need to get on with it, and that's what I do. So yeah, get a lot of pleasure out of it.